Okay, what we're looking at today is the evaluation for gross negligence manslaughter. So you need this in an essay. Remember, an essay for OCR is worth 25 marks, 10 for AO1, legal knowledge, and 15 for AO3. So watch my other video on AO1 and then add this, which is worth 15 marks. It's not an exhaustive list, like you might come up with your own ideas, which absolutely fine, put those things in. I would start off by discussing the fact that gross negligence manslaughter is a common law crime. So it has not been legislated on by Parliament. So there's no Manslaughter Act of Parliament. The definition and the law is set out in a case, the case of Adamaco. Judges are making the law, which is seen as undemocratic because we do not elect judges. The role of the judge should not be to make law. That's Parliament's role because Parliament is sovereign. But the role of the judge is to apply and interpret the law. However, judges are legal experts. They have flexibility to change the law on a case-by-case basis. So although you lack a bit of certainty, you do have flexibility as new situations arise and as society changes. The second thing I would talk about is the fact it's a discretionary life sentence. Remember, with murder, mandatory life, the judge has no flexibility. So discretionary life sentence, you can avoid prison. You could get a suspended sentence and not go to prison. Equally, anything between that and life in prison. It's good because a dangerous person needs to be punished and society needs to be protected, so the judge can put them in prison for a long time. Some would argue the fact that you might not even get sent to prison dilutes the seriousness of the killing, because somebody has died here, and if the offender does not get a long prison sentence, it doesn't send out the right message to society. It doesn't act as a deterrent. The next thing I would talk about is the fact that there is a mix of civil and criminal law. Now, civil law and criminal law are two very, very different things. They have a different standard of proof, if you are sure, in criminal law, and in civil law on the balance of probabilities. So the two really should be kept very, very separate. So gross negligence manslaughter uses parts of civil law, for example, duty of care. The fact that the jury have to decide as well that the defendant's conduct is so gross that it's criminal, it's kind of illogical. It's a circular test. It's almost the same as saying, well, have they committed a crime? And it is a crime because it's criminal and it's in the Crown Court. So I don't quite know why they have to work out, whether it's so gross it's criminal. They just end up going round in circles. The fourth point that I would talk about is the fact that there is a possible third type of manslaughter. This one, I think it should be used by the CPS more, and it's not. It has a nice, clear definition. So reckless manslaughter, in the case of Lidar, which was 2000, the court said, hang on a minute, you've got UDAM, you've got gross negligence, but also you have got this third type. You don't need to know much about it, but I would just be aware of its existence. So reckless manslaughter, from the case of Lidar, is where the defendant foresees the risk of death or serious injury, but goes ahead and takes that risk. So I think that's a clear definition, and maybe it should be used more. And it's actually quite a serious type of manslaughter because you are foreseeing the risk of death or serious injury, but you just think, sod it, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Okay, the next thing is quite an interesting one. It's about convicting and sentencing professionals. Now, a lot of gross negligence manslaughter cases do involve professionals who've done something wrong or haven't done something in their job, or they involve companies. Think of the Pret-a-Manger example, the girl who had an allergy to sesame seeds and she died and Pret hadn't labelled the food correctly. Could that be gross negligence manslaughter? The issue is, who do you prosecute? So juries are very reluctant to convict professionals, for example, doctors, because in court, doctors will be smart, they'll be very eloquent, so they can speak very well, and juries like that, compared to, think about a drug addict who's giving evidence as opposed to a teacher or a doctor. There's a big difference. So juries struggle to convict professionals because they don't see them as true criminals. So this means that many professionals go unpunished. It's very difficult because if doctors were prosecuted every time somebody died, nobody would want to do that job. So the law has to give them some protection. If a professional person is convicted, they're found guilty by the jury, or they plead guilty, they're likely to get a lesser sentence. So there's definitely some bias going on in the criminal justice system. I mean, we know this exists anyway, but it's quite evident. There's almost like a class bias here. And this goes against the rule of law and the idea that the law is equal and it applies to everybody equally. In terms of reform proposals, in 2006, the Law Commission recommended keeping gross negligence manslaughter, and it just restated what the current law is pretty much. It said that there has to be a clear risk of death from the defendant's act or omission. But at the moment, the jury decide if there's a risk of death. The Law Commission said, we think it should be the defendant who sees a risk of death, which I think is a good thing because it protects very young or very elderly defendants who might not have seen the risk. It also protects those with any learning or mental disabilities. So the reform proposal is just that. It's a proposal. Again, Parliament has done nothing about it. So I would conclude that means the law is working quite well in practice. Other issues, I mean, there are plenty of other issues. You can look at some of the cases individually. You can talk about the fact there are lots of situations where the defendant owes a duty of care. The case of Wacker, where they decided that even though he was doing an illegal activity, he still owed a duty of care. So it widens the law, it protects society from dangerous people, and it ensures that people take responsibility. We want our doctors to be taking responsibility, our lifeguards, our teachers, our parents, and it's designed to protect us from death. So those are some of the key points that I would be thinking about for an essay.